This video will be a video that is important to unique insights, which are important. Um, Start with an ego man, an egotistical man who knows he's doomed. He knows he's doomed to a death, a bad death. And so, starting off, we have the got lots of notifications popping up. Sorry about that. I'll turn these off in a second. So the ego knows and the man knows that he's got a bad death coming. He's basically doomed. He's been abandoned by the gods and basically anything else. So the story starts out as a person who is aware of his ultimate doom and bad end. So having some awareness of the bad end coming, he's desperate to get some kind of assistance from somewhere. Of course, he doesn't know where or whom, but no, he knows what he knows so far, and what he already knows so far is that unless he gets some assistance or unless he gets some help or support from either deities or some form of inner divine intervention, well, he knows he's screwed. He knows he's nothing more than on a path to death, and a bad one. He's also aware that he's been here on what's called a reincarnation wheel. And so he's been born, he's aware that he has been born over and over again. And it's always the same thing. So he is very, well, emotionally distraught and ultimately not too hopeful whatsoever, zero hope, hopeless. Ultimately the truth, it not only hurts, but it's painful because to see a person being born over and over again, to make the same mistake over and over again, in an endless cycle of life and death and rebirth, reincarnation, the karmic wheel, he realizes that his lifetime after lifetime after lifetime are the same exact experience. It happens that every time he's erased, he forgets everything. He has no knowledge of who or what or why he is. And ultimately, his feelings are aware of some important facts if he could possibly translate those feelings into any kind of information that could actually help him. So he starts out the journey being desperate, and ultimately desperate for some kind of attention from somewhere, knowing that man can't help him. And ultimately, he just has not found God or goddess, or has not found deities, so he doesn't know where to turn to. So he just starts out blind. And the idea that a person could actually know something about themselves that could reveal information that might be useful to them, well, ultimately, for years, maybe he's traveling blind and he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows what he's feeling, though, and what he's feeling is that whatever he's doing, it either gets somewhere or it doesn't get somewhere. But he's not getting anywhere for years, and ultimately, he's desperate to keep trying because it's possible he can get somewhere if he does, but he doesn't even know what he's doing or how to do it. So he's literally blind in everything he's doing. He only knows that if he can't, he has to get the attention of the gods or goddesses, or he has to get the attention of the divine or the nature of what God is. He has to get their attention because without their help, he's not going to make it. And he starts to realize this after a time. And so he's learning about certain characters. So we're going to talk about certain characters, say Apollo. The story that I got for the information about what I'm about to tell you about in mythology is mythological sense. It's going to be information that I've got that is true to the storyline and also true to the symbolic relationship of how the story and characters relate to each other, which means that if I'm going to tell you a story, it's all made up right now, like maybe it wasn't true. Well, ultimately, it should be seen as the same thing as true, even if it wasn't true, because the understanding can be had by the story itself. So it's less important to wonder about whether the story is true as to wonder more not wonder, but more like ascertain and translate what symbolically or in an analogical sense, what is he trying to say? Ultimately, there's valuable information to be had, valuable understandings to have, insights. So the the god Apollo say that he was killed by a man named Achilles, and Achilles was so in mythology they don't. That's not what happened, but according to mythology, Apollo, the sun god, didn't die from being beheaded by Achilles when he attacked the beach of Troy. But assume that Achilles had attacked that beach of Troy with his 50 myrmidons before the Greek fleet arrived, and he went straight into the temple of Apollo, where Apollo was actually living as a god, and he actually surprised him. And ultimately, because it was thought that Apollo sees everything, there's no way that Achilles could surprise Apollo, the sun god, in his temple and to behead him and to kill him. There's just the chances of that happening are as far as everyone's known, even the gods say Apollo sees everything. There's no way he's gonna not get surprise attacked by Achilles. Ultimately, because Achilles is under what they call the goddess screen, which means that the goddesses had something to do with this, trying to kill Apollo. And so it probably stemmed from a fight between Artemis and Apollo. But basically, Apollo does not actually see Achilles coming because Achilles is the son of a goddess, and ultimately he's not a demigod; he's a demigoddess. So the Achilles is when he's coming towards the beaches of Troy. Apollo doesn't notice his coming because Apollo's only feeling a goddess coming, and ultimately the Myrmidons are also a type of fighters that are under the divine feminine. That's why they're called Myrmidons, and Achilles' mother was a full-fledged goddess, which meant that it's very possible that Achilles did not. Well, Achilles was going to. He knew he could surprise Apollo if he could get in that temple and surprise Apollo. He could behead him, and ultimately gods will die when they don't have heads. So you could kill a god, but it ultimately doesn't happen, and no man would ever be able to kill a god. But Achilles might have been the only man in the world that could do it. If suppose that Achilles had killed off Apollo and murdered him, then before the Greek fleet even arrived at Troy, the war was already over. They basically accomplished their purpose, killing the god Apollo, and he was a protector of Troy. The next protector of Troy was Athena, and ultimately there was some protection on Troy through Athena, the fact they had her as a goddess. If they lost her as a goddess, then there's less protection for them. And ultimately, so they had to get rid of Apollo, and then they're going to have to trick Troy into getting rid of the goddesses, which they do. But ultimately, as long as they keep Athena, who's actually a god, because Athena came from her dad's forehead. So Athena's a goddess that is actually a god, not a goddess. All the goddesses were actually mixtures of feminine and masculine, or having gods and goddesses in them. And like Artemis was all feminine, Hera was all feminine, Minerva was a mixture of masculine and feminine, so she had Mars as well as the feminine. And then Athena didn't have any feminine; she was just her dad Zeus. So the daughter of her father, in the story that she came right out of her dad's forehead. Well, the story is that Athena was born from her dad's forehead. Came right out wearing armor and everything. Well, that really says is that she doesn't have any feminine in her. She's just her dad. She's a goddess that's just actually just a god. So the only one that is. And so you have to understand that if Troy had not known any of this, then Troy might have thought that Athena was a goddess, just like Artemis was a goddess or Hera was a goddess, and they knew all the goddesses. And ultimately Minerva, but ultimately what was different about it was that truly they would be allowed to get rid of the feminine goddesses, but they would not be allowed to get rid of Athena. They would at least have to keep on to her, because and if they didn't know that Athena wasn't feminine, she was just a powerful goddess as far as they thought. Not much different than the other goddesses, but in fact, she was not even a goddess. She was actually a god, which meant that as long as they kept Athena, they would not be considering having rejected either Zeus or his daughter, who was actually him. And so if Troy knew this, they certainly would never have dared to do it. And ultimately, they were allowed to follow a goddess that was actually a god. So they could get rid of the goddesses and still have Athena and worship her. And ultimately, they were tricked into thinking, maybe they didn't know. Maybe they thought Athena, if they can get rid of the goddesses, well, Athena's a goddess, right? So why can't we get rid of her? Well, the truth is that you can get rid of all the goddesses that have feminine in them, but you can't get rid of Athena because she's not feminine. And so Zeus would have not allowed any of them to or Troy would have the permission to get rid of the feminine goddess and reject her, but not Athena. So if they knew, they would never have done it. And the whole thing about Troy, about stealing the palladium, was it was in Athena's temple, basically, when the Greeks Diomedes and Odysseus stole the palladium, and they took off with Athena. Actually, she went with the Greeks out of the city. So when they stole the palladium from Athena's temple, they stole the presence of Athena out of Troy, and they took it with them back to the Chian camp, which was a successful victory for the Greeks and a complete loss for Troy, because ultimately, having allowed that to happen, or accepting that they could get rid of the goddesses, including Athena, well, they don't have anything anymore, and ultimately they're doomed to fall now. So they would not have even known this, and those egos drinking alcohol would not have been able to, if they couldn't know the stuff, understand that the prophet Athena, Hellenus, would have been able to tell them about this. Like, you can't, like, if a Hellenus was a augur, a prince of Troy, and he would have known all this. He would have said, he would have tried to counsel his dad Priam and Hector and say, you can't, yeah, as long as you keep Athena, everything will be fine. But if you want to get rid of the feminine goddesses, well, that's fine, because Zeus doesn't like his wife or Hera anyway. So Zeus didn't mind if Troy didn't, if they rejected the goddesses, didn't bother Zeus one bit. But ultimately, Zeus said, he would have told those Trojans, you have to know that Athena is the authority, and you can't reject her. So I'm sure he told him that, and Hellenus would have, if he was privy to this information, Hellenus would have not been able to go tell his brother at Priam. Or maybe if Hellenus was told, look, by Zeus, you're the high priest of Apollo, you're all that's left. So if you can't tell them about Athena being a god, because she's a goddess and she happens to be just masculine now. So ultimately, Hellenus wouldn't have been allowed maybe to tell his brother and his dad something very important, like, you can't afford to get rid of Athena, and then I can't really tell you why, because Zeus doesn't want me to tell you. Ultimately, he couldn't even say that much. He would have just been probably thinking, wow, okay, so if I'm forbidden to tell my dad and my brother the absolute truth, that like, yeah, all I could really tell him is, don't lose Athena no matter what. And they'd say, why? Is it so important? Well, I'm telling you, if you lose Athena, we're dust. Ultimately, that would be about as much as he could offer. The fact he knew exactly why, and he wouldn't have been able to tell him, would have been, I'm sure, difficult. The murder of Hermes up in the mountain pass. Hermes was up at the mountain pass. Hellenus was told by Minerva to go to meet Diomedes and Odysseus in a camp up in the Mount Ida. And so he was basically thought he was on a mission for the goddesses, and basically was trying to fix Troy and fix the divine feminine conflict. And so he would have thought he was saving the world. He would have went up there and followed Minerva. But see, Minerva, the goddess, she wanted to kill all the Trojans, including Hellenus. And ultimately, Hellenus thought he was special. So he thought he had the favor of the goddess Minerva. And because she came to him, like, acting like she was his friend, saying, you want to help us? Like, we're going to sack Troy, but if you help us, maybe Troy doesn't have to fall. So Hellenus that would have been of the understanding that he thought that, like, okay, I have an important mission. I mean, I'm going to save Troy from being sacked by going to go give the Greeks the information they need. So Hellenus would have been traveling up in the mountains under the instruction of Minerva to go meet the Greeks and turn himself to surrender to the Greeks. The whole point being that Minerva told him, they'll capture you, and then you can give them information based upon what Troy needs to do to fix itself, so it doesn't have to fall, and we won't have to actually sack Troy, maybe. Well, Hellenus thought that's why he would even do it, because he thought, okay, well, you're telling me that if I surrender myself to the enemy and tell them some information, that they're gonna maybe Troy doesn't have to fall, right? But see, Minerva might have been lying, and Minerva just wanted him to go give that information away, and she was planning on letting him die. Ultimately, she hated ego and hated every Trojan man, including Hellenus. But of course, he would have been fooled and utterly believed and trusted her, because he was thinking that she was pretending to be his friend, and saying that she liked him, but she hates Trojans. And ultimately, if she hates Trojans and she hates him too, she wanted to get him captured so he could be tortured and killed, or at least give the information that she wants her Greeks to know about. See, that was partly what he told, what Helenus would have told them, is that if the Athena gets stolen if the Palladium statue of Athena gets stolen from the temple of Athena in Troy, well, basically that doesn't mean they could steal it. See, what Helenus would have known is that you can't steal the Palladium. See, the idea with the mythology is, if you read the mythology, it doesn't have anything good to say about what the implications are about how Helenus is looked at as betraying Troy, or giving information away, or telling the enemy and going over to the enemy's side for rewards. Ultimately, none of that was true, because Helenus was not a traitor to Troy, and he certainly was not intending to do anything but try to save Troy from being sacked, which meant that the mythological story, does suggest that Helenus, well, not only was a betrayer, but he was a backstabber, and he himself went to the enemy and gave him information that was responsible for the downfall of Troy. And ultimately, he was looked at as possibly a betrayer of his own people and Troy itself, which would have been really bad. So he would look terrible. I mean, ultimately, if I was to tell you that Helenus was ultimately trying to do nothing more than save Troy, and he was not betraying anyone, he was trying to help everyone, including the goddesses, and that was his biggest mistake, was trusting Minerva and even thinking that she might be telling the truth. So if Hermes was up on the mountain pass waiting for Helenus on his way, because Hermes, the god Hermes, would have known that Helenus was on his way to turn himself in to the Greeks, specifically Odysseus and Diomedes, who were up on Mount Ida waiting for him, and he was going to go meet him there. Minerva said that they wouldn't hurt him until it said that he would be responsible for helping Troy not fall. So that's what he went up there to do. Hermes was up on the mountain pass waiting for Helenus to get up there so he could warn him that Minerva's lying. And in fact, if you turn yourself in to those authorities, you'll be murdered, and you'll be tortured and killed. And ultimately, Hermes waiting to warn Helenus of this. And Hermes never would have a chance to warn Helenus, because Athena knew what Hermes was doing, and that he was up there on that mountain pass. And so Athena went to go kill him, and did. So Athena went and surprise attacked Hermes, the god Hermes, up on the mountain pass, killed him dead, under the idea that Hermes doesn't need to be alive if he's going to try to help Helenus and all the egotistical Trojans win. And ultimately, they just figured if Hermes is going to be on the side of Troy with Apollo, well, Apollo's already dead, and ultimately Hermes is going to die now, because they can't let Hermes warn Helenus of the truth that Minerva is really setting him up for failure. And so when Helenus goes up on the mountain pass and Hermes is dead, because Hermes has been killed by Athena, and Helenus sees that, he doesn't know it's Hermes, but he sees that something's dead there, and it's not human. It in fact was Hermes on the ground, and he stared at it just too long to piss off Minerva enough, where she supposedly rationalized that now it's okay to kill him. And ultimately, it was just because of what was told by what would be the figure of Satan later, or the devil later, or the masculine collective later on after the war, that would hate goddesses and hate women and enslave the divine feminine collective for what they thought was good reasons. So let's explore now why Satan or the devil would actually hate women, or want to enslave the women or the divine collective, or just remove the goddesses or kill them off. And ultimately, what could they possibly be thinking, or what's their motive? Well, understand that if Satan or the devil was to tell you that they came into existence in the 7th year of Troy, but that they didn't exist before the 7th year of Troy, then understand, for the purposes of understanding, the devil and Satan didn't exist until the 7th year of Troy, in the mid-year. So after 7 years of fighting in the Trojan War, in the mid-year, in the 7th year, Helenus was contacted by what would become, he didn't know who they were, a mysterious god or two that was telling him and contacting him, giving him information. And it was basically that you have to know that there's no settling this dispute. In fact, you've tried to do it for 7 years and you failed. So after 7 years, this mysterious gods came to Helenus and told him that you have to realize that you're not going to save the world. That in fact, what you're going to do is you're going to die, and ultimately they're going to betray you badly. So basically, Helenus might have been told by those entities, warned about Minerva, but he would have not believed them. So, I mean, it would be kind of likened to the same thing if Satan came to tell you, like, I'm just trying to help you. Yeah, I'm giving you some information so you don't die, and I'm just trying to help you. Like, you can't give anything to those goddesses or those women, or we're going to enslave them because they're dirtbags. We'll kill them or enslave them, but they can't be free women. They have to be under our thumb and under us directly, and we'll be the master, and that's it. So ultimately, Helenus would have thought, like, well, I don't know who you are, but ultimately I can't listen to that, because I can't even believe that that's okay to just decide it like that. Ultimately Helenus being warned in the seventh year by these new deities, the devil and Satan, came. Well, ultimately, he was going to say those are evil entities, man. They're wrong, and they're just saying that there's no way to fix this problem. That the women are bad, the goddesses are bad. They're all wrong. We have to betray them before they betray us. And well, ultimately, he wouldn't believe those entities. Then he wouldn't believe Satan or the devil when the devil's telling him stuff. He would think, like, you're just trying to get her, and you already hate her anyways, and I'm trying to help her, and she's trying to help me. And then they'd say, no, she's not trying to help you. She's going to backstab and burn your ass. You'll end up dead, tortured to death because of her. And so if you don't listen to us, basically you're going to die. And Helenus would have just been tragically dismissing that idea that he should listen to Satan or the devil rather than the goddesses, when they promised him, we're on your side as long as you're on our side. Well, if that was true, then certainly he had to trust the goddesses long enough to die for her at least once, to be able to say, whoops, well, I guess the goddesses can't be trustworthy now for the rest of eternity, because, yeah, if they did kill Helenus after he trusted him, well, then I guess Satan and the devil were right. But then Helenus would be dead. So ultimately, I guess that's what he got coming when he was warned and told that the women aren't equal. They're going to be slaves or dead. And well, I mean, I don't know, but Helenus might have been like, damn, I didn't listen to Satan or the devil, and ultimately I trusted the goddess and got killed and betrayed by her. So great. So I should have listened to Satan and the devil, is what I'm going to learn from it. And ultimately, then I would have not trusted Minerva, and I would have said, I don't know, she's saying she's my friend, but I think she's going to lead me into a slaughterhouse, which is exactly what happened. So Helenus would have had a hard lesson that he had to learn. Not only that he didn't listen to the two entities trying to save him, but those two entities that he didn't listen to, well, he'd have to ultimately feel guilty about it too, for the fact that he didn't listen to them, and they were actually right. And then ultimately, the fact he trusted the goddesses and then got killed for it and tortured for it, because as soon as they caught him, they tortured the shit out of him until he was dead and got all the information on him, and then killed him. Ultimately, they hated him. He was a big fat ego, and they wanted all the Trojans dead. So I guess that would make him feeling quite foolish, and quite stupid, because because if he ever faced that Satan and the devil again 3,000 years later or whatever, it would have been, I told you so, and you were an idiot. And basically it was like, well, no, you can't overstate that truth. I was a big freaking idiot, because ultimately, I trusted her because she promised me that she wasn't going to betray me. And ultimately she did anyway. So I had to find that out. I had to get betrayed by her and die so I could understand what the truth is, that Satan and the devil were correct, and the goddesses are not to be believed, and they are liars. And ultimately, how can I even say that or even come to that conclusion? That would be pretty intense to even dare. So ultimately, in the end, maybe I'd be afraid to come to those conclusions, or even say that I can't even fathom that idea. Like, I'm not going to side with Satan and the devil just because they're right. And I got to keep trying to work with her, even though she's wrong. And so, he would have been stuck in some conundrum of I'm in trouble now, and for all time. So if Hermes was killed and also Apollo was killed, well, that's because Apollo was a god of Troy, and Achilles was the only man on earth that ever killed a god, and that would go down in history as a mythological fact. But understand, that's only if what I'm telling you is true. And understand, the mythology doesn't say anything about Achilles killing Apollo, the sun god. It only says that he entered the temple there and attacked the priests, and it was the first place he went. So he did actually behead a statue out front, one of the statues of Apollo. So in the mythological sense, they say that he actually attacked Apollo's temple, and he actually beheaded Apollo's statue in front of the temple to insult him. And ultimately, that in the mythology, Apollo doesn't die right then. He goes on to be in the story. But I'm telling you that if the truth is Apollo was surprised and murdered by Achilles, and then understand why the mythology doesn't have any truth in it, and it's not telling you anything about the truth, like how Hermes died up on the mountain pass when Athena killed him, because Hermes was on the side of Apollo, and also on the side of trying to help the Trojan egos win if they're going to behave, because he didn't think all egos that behave should die. He thought that egos that misbehave should die, and egos that are willing to behave should not die. So he was supporting the egos that were actually worthy and not the ones that weren't. But to the women and to the goddesses, ego is ego, and it all should die. So we don't think some ego should live, but some of it should die. We think it's all sucky ego, egotisticalness. We think it all should die. So ultimately, that's why Hermes wouldn't side with the goddesses. That's why Apollo wouldn't side with the goddesses, because they were utterly wanting those Trojan men to be dead. They wanted Troy to fall. And they wanted to exterminate the line of Hector, literally to get rid of him forever. Ultimately, there's alternative endings to the story. Where Hellenist actually goes on to marry Hector's wife as a slave to the son of Achilles and become king of many lands. But that's only a maybe. Understand there's alternative endings, like where Hellenist gets captured, killed, and murdered and tortured to death. And then also, if maybe he gets rewarded by Agamemnon as a betrayer of Troy, and then he goes off to be king of many lands. So yeah, there's multiple stories and alternative endings, which kind of suggest that different things could have happened to Hellenist depending on what he did. So coming back into this life, if to be that a person would try 7 years to take 7 years to try to sort things out with the Divine Feminine Collective as an augur or a fortune teller or a priest of Apollo, as a pope to Apollo, the highest priest at the highest position. So Hellenist had a highest position to God Apollo. He was the pope, his personal pope, which meant that he was the highest ranking priest all the way right under Apollo, the god himself, and during the Trojan War. So he was a very important man. He talked to the god every day and in person, and the god didn't usually visit people like in person every day or even that much, maybe more than you would have thought back then. But the idea here is if Hellenist is murdered and killed, and then he's a sucker fool, and he's got to know it, because when Satan and the devil came to him and said, look, dude, if you are going to trust her and trust those goddesses, they're going to backstab you and murder you, and then you're going to be dead. And I'm going to tell you in your next life, I told you so, but I'm going to be really pissed if you're going to dismiss what I'm telling you. Ultimately, he's going to dismiss the devil and Satan as like, yeah, but I don't even know who you are. Like, you're not good. The goddesses don't like you one bit. They say you're murdering bad, evil entities. I don't think I can afford to listen to you. I have a chance here to save the world. Trust the women. I have a chance to have a relationship with the goddess and make things right. Well, ultimately, Hellenist was like a sucker fool to think that how could he literally not fall into the trap, because he's going to try to prove the goddesses can be trusted, that in fact Troy doesn't have to fall. He's going to actually trust Minerva. He's going to actually, if he survives, then Satan and the devil are wrong. But ultimately, if he doesn't survive, well, then they weren't wrong. And what he's going to find out is what an idiot he is for trusting the divine feminine, and that's what he got, and he deserves what he gets. And ultimately, he'll feel really stupid, because what happens is he forgets everything. He's born into another body. He's repeatedly born over and over again. Now he forgets all about his past. He forgets who he used to be, what he ever did. He doesn't have any memory of it whatsoever until 3,000 years later, as he's being born over and over as a loser and a nobody. And yeah, but whatever it is, he's 3,000 years later, he comes to a life where he actually gets somewhere. And how does he get somewhere? Well, ultimately, he ends up suddenly being confronted by Satan and the devil, who 3,000 years before had told him as a new god coming into the picture. Well, he didn't know who they were. When they first showed up in the 7th year of Troy, the Satan and the devil were brand new entities. They were gods. Who are you? Like, I've never heard of you. We've heard of all the gods and goddesses, but not you. Ultimately, they were brand new. They were brought in the 7th year. What does that mean? Well, after 7 years of trying something, it means that it can't be done. If 7 years, if you've tried something for 7 years, it can be a God's law that you have to try it for 7 years. And ultimately, after 7 years, if it can't be done, well, if it doesn't get done by 7, then it can't ever be done. And ultimately, you got to give it 7 years, because maybe if you try everything after 7 years, you will exhaust it every try of everything. So basically Hellenists didn't listen to Satan or the devil and dismissed them as utter bad entities. And then he ended up dead over it. And then they probably made him feel stupid because every lifetime they'd say, I told you so. And now you're a nobody, born over and over again as a loser, and you're nothing. And you didn't listen to us before, so we're not going to help you. And ultimately, where's your goddesses that saved you? They didn't save you. They killed you. And you tried to believe them and trust them, and you're dead, boy. And now you don't got our support, and you don't got their support. They don't like you, and we don't like you. And ultimately, Hellas would have been, damn. Like I was only trying to help and fix everything, and like I got totally screwed. And ultimately now I can't get help from any of the gods, not even the bad ones. And so truly, if Satan the devil could have been willing to actually save him, well, I mean, if they would be willing to help him, they certainly weren't willing to help him after he dismissed them as bad entities and believed the goddesses and said, yeah, like I'm going to trust her. Well, yeah, but we're going to keep letting you know from every lifetime you're born over and over again what a bad decision you made, and don't expect our help either because you dismissed us when we first came to you and we weren't telling you a lie. Ultimately, yeah, he would incur the wrath of Satan and the devil, plus all the goddesses which he trusted, which hate him then and still hate him now. So understand that he's hated because he's an egotistical spirit of what with the Trojan with the Troy, the Trojans, the masculine divine collective of Trojan men that were favored by Zeus, were favored. Zeus loved the Trojan men more than anything in the world. He said they're my blessed elite elect. Ultimately, they were the egos before they just made misbehaving. Before ego was all bad and wrong, they were basically ego that were beloved by Zeus. And what happened to the ego that was hated after Troy? Well, it was hated after Troy because after Troy, literally, we'd find out that the goddesses can't be trusted. You can't trust the feminine, and ultimately, she's got a choice. We could kill her. Well, first, we have to kill all the goddesses off. So there's going to be one god. So that'll be a big war that happens where Zeus kills all his family, his daughters, every goddess dies, and ultimately it's because it's all over. Like it didn't get fixed, but it was worse than that. Like Troy fell, got sacked, they destroyed Zeus's favorite elect, and ultimately the goddesses tried to usurp the power from Zeus, and he had to kill every one of them, all his daughters and his wife, and they're all dead. So there's one god now, and in the end, there's one god. And the new era after Troy comes in, there's one god. That's all you hear about is there's one god. It's true. There's one god. Because all the goddesses are dead, and they were murdered for betraying Hellenists. So why did they have to actually die? Because Hellenist was being 100% trying to help. Because Hellenist was a high priest of Apollo, and he was a pope right under Apollo, which meant that he was a loving, loyal, and more loyal than any of anything. He was unheard of loyal, which meant that if you are a god and you saw what happened to Hellenists, they tortured him to death in the worst ways. And ultimately, he was trying to help, and he trusted the goddess, and she totally set him up for the slaughter. Understand, she betrayed him on purpose and didn't even care. She lied to him, pretended to be his friend, and then she led him into a slaughterhouse. And ultimately, that he got tortured really bad, and in the worst ways, in the worst imaginable ways, which meant that it was not forgivable. And certainly Apollo wouldn't forgive it, because Apollo would kill all of them, but he was dead himself. So Apollo couldn't even avenge his high priest, but Zeus would. Zeus would say, for what you did to Hellenus, the high priest, for what you did, all of you goddesses are dead, and you will die, and none of you will ever have power again. There was only going to be one god from now on, and there's no more goddesses, guaranteed. And ultimately, Zeus would murder off his entire family, and every goddess and all of the divine feminine rule would be completely reestablished as enslaved by the one god himself, which he would enslave that entire collective and say, woman, you're nothing more than a witch, and you're lucky you get to live, and I don't burn you at the stake, and you better do what I tell you. Ultimately, it was a wrathful god, angry at the divine feminine. And why? Because of what they did to Hellenus, what they did to the high priest of Apollo, because of what they did to him. And he was loyal 100%, which meant that he was trying to help, and he trusted her 100%. What it did was incur the wrath of God himself, of Zeus himself. And ultimately, Zeus decided to kill his own family over it, because he couldn't. He knew that not only if Minerva, my daughter, that vixen Minerva daughter of mine, if she is so backstabbing as bad as what she did to Hellenus, who was the most loyal priest and actually believed her, I can't trust that I could allow my daughter to live, because she'll try to do that to me. I guarantee it. He definitely knew it. So what did Zeus really know? He knew that, like, after what he saw Minerva and those goddesses do to Hellenus, he knew that if they get to live, that he'll be dead himself. There won't be one god. There'll probably be one goddess someday, and all the gods will get murdered off. So he had to kill all the goddesses first while he had a chance, and he did. So there'd be why all the goddesses disappeared, and there's no more goddesses anymore. There's just one God now, and it's Zeus in the name of Jehovah, who turned his name into Jehovah later. But ultimately, Jehovah is the father of Satan and the devil. So then what I'm going to tell you is those two gods that showed up to warn Hellenists, and he didn't listen to them. He dismissed them and insulted them. They were there to try to save him, keep him from dying a terrible, tragic death and suffering for 3,000 years after that. And he wouldn't listen to him because he was trusting the divine feminine and believing Minerva. So basically, they were not only not happy with him, but his one chance to actually save himself and save Troy was he would have had to listen to Satan and the devil and actually trust them instead. And ultimately, if he had done it, then guess what? He would have not only not died, but he would have actually saved Troy from being sacked, because the goddess's only plan was to kill Troy and make sure it was sacked. And so basically, if Satan and the devil had convinced Hellenists to trust them, they would have had the ability to actually prevent the fall of Troy. So what was Hellenist trying to do? He was trying to prevent the fall of Troy. So what did Hellenist need to do? He needed to listen to Satan and the devil and trust them, actually. Okay, so if he had, you're saying that it would have actually been good? Yeah, because they would have never went crooked. Understand that they went crooked, evil, angry after the war. So what happened to the twisted nature of Satan and the devil? Why are they so twisted and angry? Well, I'll tell you right now, they don't trust a woman after they saw what those women and those goddesses did to Hellenists. They say that they led him to the slaughter, the most loyal priest, the high pope of Apollo himself. They led him to the slaughter. They utterly led him to death and knew he was going to die. He trusted them 100% with all his heart, thinking he was going to help the world and help them. And he wanted to help them. So he was so freaking gullible that they were like, okay, now the wrath of the entire divine feminine collective and all the goddesses is like, this is not only not okay, but now Satan and the devil are not just pissed, but they're saying, okay, all women are going to be enslaved and burned at the stake as witches, and we will kill them. We don't respect them. Those women are enslaved by us, and the whole divine feminine collective will be nothing more than ruled as by force with fist, and we will not like them, trust them, or ever give them another chance, because if they will burn Hellenist, the most loyal priest of Apollo, if they will burn him, as loyal as he was, understand there's no such thing that we could ever trust her. Not ever, because we're not even anywhere near as loyal as he was, and they burned him. That means there's no capability, there's no possibility that we could ever trust them. They are not to be trusted ever, not for all time. Ultimately, to come to that realization would have been deep. It would have made the behavior of Satan and the devil to be like, wow, we are not nice anymore, and we're really mean, and we're definitely not given. There's no equality. The women are not going to get nothing except burnt at the stake or slapped around, and they better do what they're told, because we'll beat them to death or around in life. Ultimately, we're going to do anything unfair, and we don't need to be fair. We don't want to be fair. We're not going to even care to be fair. We're going to be unfair and like it. And ultimately, it's their fault. We're going to blame them for everything. And from now on, if we're not punishing Hellenists and saying you're an idiot, fool, gullible idiot that trusted the goddess Minerva, and you will end up dead and suffering 3,000 years for that, because every lifetime while you're a loser, nobody, we're not going to tell you anything who you are. You didn't trust us then, and you're not trusting us now. You're still on her side. So what truly did Hellenists truly? How did he deserve 3,000 years of the wrath of Satan and the devil? Because understand, they knew who he was, and each time he's born again, he doesn't know who he is, but he's still trusting. He's still willing to trust that goddess. He's still willing to be a goddess man. He still has some idea that he can recapture what he doesn't even remember any of this, but he's trying to save Troy still. And it's in the next lifetimes, he's trying to I knew it was important a long time ago. I was trying to do something great. Well, what were you trying to do? Well, I was the first one to distrust Satan and the devil, and then also, listen to the goddesses and trust them and die for it, and then spend 3,000 years having the devil and Satan pick on me and saying you're an idiot. Yeah, if you listen to us, we could have prevented all this suffering, and ultimately, like we don't. You're still on her side. You're still an idiot. Ultimately, Hellenists would be like, "What did I do wrong?" Well, you still trust her, you fool. You don't even know, but you still trust her. You're still trying to trust her. You're still willing to build a trust relationship with her. She's a witch. She's not going to be free. She's an enslaved woman that's going to be a daughter and a wife, and she better be obedient or we're going to kill her ass. So there's no choice for her. We don't even like her anymore. Okay, great. So then I can't do much, can I? No, you couldn't do much then, and you can't do much now. You're an idiot. Great. And that's that's literally what Hellenist gets, right? Is he gets Satan angry at him. Yeah, because understand what you did. You started a distrust with us when we were actually trying to help you. You did it. You're the first one that did it. When we showed up, you're the first one we talked to. And then you got us to be distrusted for the rest of the time. So basically, they blame him. So the goddess blames Helenus for being an idiot Trojan that should have thought he deserved to live, and she thinks he's an idiot for trusting her, and he gets what he wants. So he gets what he deserves. So what her feeling is that fool, dumb, egotistical nobody that I hate. If he trusts me, well, he's an idiot. He shouldn't trust me, and he shouldn't even be alive. All ego should die. Those demons and devils and Satans, and ultimately, yeah, that's what she'd do, is kill him. She didn't have no, she wouldn't let Satan or the devil live. If she could kill him, she would kill him dead. And ultimately, any man that would be under him, she'd kill them dead too. Well, truly, what would Helenus' mistake be? When he 3,000 years later, what would his mistake be? Well, he would realize, I made a big mistake calling Satan or the devil a liar and trying to, yeah, make that my pledge of suffering for 3,000 years. That in fact now they won't be trusted because of me, because I'm a loyal high priest that says don't trust those two entities. They tried to save me once, but I didn't listen. I trusted her instead, and then she led me to a slaughter. Okay, so what are you going to say now? Well, I don't know, but I might want to tell the story of maybe what would I say? Well, I'd say I'm sorry to Satan and the devil. I'd say, you know what? I wish I would have listened to you back then when you first showed up here in the 7th year of the war, saying that it can't be solved. The women are not going to capitulate. They want to rule the gods, and ultimately as dominants. So basically, okay, so then he'd have to apologize to Satan and the devil and say, I didn't mean to stain your reputation forever. I'm sure you must be really pissed at me, but I was trying to do the right thing. And I really did believe that whatever she was telling me you were about, that you were about it. So ultimately, and they're saying, yeah, and she's a liar. She's a liar back then. She's a liar right now. She's still a liar, which means that she like. So in other words, all Helenus could really do is just apologize to Satan and the devil and say, look, I screwed up big time because I completely didn't trust you, and not only did it make you suffer, and everyone else didn't follow you because of me, and ultimately it was my fault, and I trusted her and I died for it, and ultimately, so I had to pay the ultimate highest dishonor for too long. So then, how could Helenus really? How would he feel knowing, if he knew the story, if he 3,000 years later he's alive again, and he sees the story about what happened, and he's like, damn it, like that's just such a tragedy, man. I've died too many times in the worst ways, suffered too many times in the worst ways, and like expected for that to happen forever, because basically now I'm cursed. And so if there was a way that he could uncurse himself, it would always be designed about how's he going to apologize to Satan and the devil and for what he did to them. How's he going to get their blessings again when they're telling him you're an idiot 3,000 years ago and you're still an idiot today? You're still following that woman. Well, let's say that he told Helenus that. How would Helenus feel if he actually could even believe any of this could be true? He would feel really stupid for like actually trusting her and still trusting her. He'd feel like an idiot. Like, I can't believe I'm still an idiot. I'd do it again. I'm not capable of not being an idiot, because I'd actually try to consider her an equal and want to work with her instead of like backstab her because she backstabs me because she'd do it to me first. Well, ultimately, yeah. I think all he would do is just have to make an official apology to those two. Say that I caused a lot of problems for everybody. I caused a lot of problems for me, mostly because I understand how much I've suffered over this for 3,000 years. And ultimately, because no one wants to listen to you now, because it was probably me that started that trend right when you arrived to try to help me. Then I ruined your reputation because I'm an idiot. But I wasn't trying to be an idiot. I was trying to be a loyal priest of the high god Apollo, who was killed by Achilles in the temple before the war even started. I would have to hope, man, that somehow Satan and the devil would accept my apology, and I could promise to disrespect women, or I won't trust her. Then I'll completely, I won't trust her. I promise you, I'll definitely look down on her like she's bad. I won't even have nothing to do with women. I won't even trust them ever again. Ultimately, we'll keep promise. But ultimately, is that going to be able to be anything for him to, what are they going to think? Like, it's kind of too late. Don't you think so, buddy? Well, it's not really too late, because ultimately he could say, I screwed up. It's my fault. And I want to undo it. Undo it? How can you undo it? You can't undo it. You could redo it, and it's the same thing over and over. It's a nightmare. Yeah. Wow. Man, oh man. That's it. It seems to me that I think if I could tell you what Satan and the devil would be telling me right now, what they would be saying is like, you know what? That's good that you actually are man enough to actually fess up your BS. And yeah, it is your fault. And so at least you had the courage to like admit your fault, and it's all true. You are an idiot. That you're still going to trust her. Well, no, I'm saying I'm working hard on realizing that I can't trust her, and you're actually right, and I'm wrong. In fact, I want to trust her, but I'm pretty of the understanding I can't ever, not ever again. And if I could actually if I could even be forgiven by you, I'd know that for a fact you're going to look at me and you're going to say, well, when you start to look at her as she really is, maybe we could even consider forgiving you. But the fact that you're still an idiot doing it, you're still going to forgive her again, and she'll backstab you again and again and again. Well, I know that I'm saying that you're just telling me that I have to hate women or be against them, or else I can't be forgiven. Well, truly, that's true. Yeah. Because you better hate them. Well, look what they did to you. Look what they did to us. Look what happened. All the goddesses had to die for it. There's no goddesses today anywhere. They're dead, every one of them, because they've all been murdered off, including Minerva, because of what they did to Hellenes. So yeah, then it's all my fault. Everything. So all the goddesses are dead, and it's my fault. Well, yes, it is your fault. And ultimately, well, you didn't do anything to kill them or get them dead. What they did to you is why they're dead and killed. So it's their fault, not yours. But you're just an idiot, and you're still trying to be an idiot. You still want to love her and trust her? You're a fool. She doesn't care about you if you die or anything. She's completely only after power and usurp the authority from you if she can. And she'll do it every time, guaranteed. Okay, so what can I do? Well, you just did it. Good for you. You did it. You said it's all my fault all the goddesses are dead because, yeah, they burned me and I was actually loyal to them, and I guess the gods killed them all for it. Well, great. So, yeah, you can feel guilty about it, but it's not your fault, and we're glad we killed them because they deserved to die. Those goddesses were bad. They were ultimately trying to usurp authority from Zeus, and they were going to make the men have to be the slaves. So if we had one goddess today and there was no such thing as gods because all the women were in charge and men were kind of really upset, well, yeah, if men were enslaved today as a collective, well, then understand if that was true, that men are the ones today. It's a woman's world, actually. We got one goddess in every church. You can go to worship goddess. Well, that would have been the truth if ultimately the goddesses had won, but the goddesses lost. So the fact is there's one God because the goddesses were killed off and exterminated, and because they deserved it is what the truth is. In the end, Hellenes would have failed miserably. He would have thought, like, how come I ever going to be forgiven by anybody? Because God doesn't like me, and Satan and the devil hate me because of what I did to them. I made the whole collective not believe them because I listened to Minerva. Minerva said, don't you trust those two entities that you don't even know they are? And ultimately, yeah, when they came to help me, I actually told the collective, don't believe those two entities. And ultimately, I was going on what she told me. And she was a goddess, so she said she knew what she's talking about. Well, she actually did not. She was lying, and the worst liar. So ultimately, the Satan and the devil would tell you the reason why they're evil and bad and as bad as they are today has everything to do with what she did to them and what she told Hellenes and what she did to Hellenes. It's ultimately unforgivable, but it's worse than that. They hate women forever over it. And they're telling Hellenes, if you're going to ever be forgiven by us, you better start hating them too. Because we can't stand that you're still a sucker fool and still loving them or trusting them, because you'll die again and again. And they still hate you. They don't want you to live. They think it's your fault that they're all dead and they can't. Yeah, Hellenes is being blamed by the goddesses for what happened to them. They're enslaved now by God. Yeah. women won't have no equality in this world guaranteed. At least that's what God told me. And so basically God said that ain't going to happen. Men, this is a man's world and men rule, and it's a fact. And if women want to think they're equal, well, it's not true. And if they want to take a man's spirit, we'll act like they're equal as long as they keep a man's spirit. But if they get a woman's spirit, we're going to kick them out or tell them to go away because they can't come in with that, her. And so women in politics are always, women in politics have to be men and take the man spirit. It's a law. You can't be a woman in politics. If you take a feminine spirit, you try to be a mommy in a political sense. Well, there's no mommies allowed in the political sense. They're all gods and men. It's not my law. It's just the law that I agree with because God says it's the facts. So I'm not going against God, and I'm not going against Goddess. And I would say that what a fool that I would trust her. And ultimately, am I going to start hating her? No, I'm not going to start hating her. I love her. And the problem is that's why I'm called an idiot by Satan and the devil. Call me an idiot. And they don't even like me. They're that sucker fool. Doesn't even know how to look at the truth and see the facts. That she's a backstabbing wench, Black Widow. Okay, I know, but if you're right, I need to seriously look in the mirror and say, like, man, like I need to start becoming more bad and wrong on purpose, with a purpose, because man, I'm just way too good. And like, I didn't deserve any of this. Well, that's debatable, buddy. Maybe we say you deserved every bit of it for ruining our reputation before we even showed up. And then absolutely, you're still doing it. So then he's going to, yeah. So the Hellenist is just going to feel real stupid and say, well, okay, fine. So I can't trust her forever. Well, that's what we tried to tell you then. That's what we've been telling you for 3,000 years. Every lifetime, you're a miserable, foolish idiot. And we never told you anything. So if we suddenly came and told you all this now, because it's 3,000 years later and we're saying, oh, maybe it's time for you to learn something, boy. Well, what? Well, maybe it's time for you to know who you used to be and what happened to you and why you're trying to save the world and be a goddess man when we hate goddesses and we killed them all. So they're not going to be around anymore. So then, yeah, when you stop being an idiot, maybe we'll actually approve of you and forgive you. And maybe we'll let you be success in something. First thing you're going to do is get rid of that mommy in you, boy, you fool. Okay, great. That's it. All right.